What if I told you? One U.S. submarine hunted Japanese destroyers instead of running from them. And in just 4 days, it sank 4 warships that changed the entire Pacific War. This is the story of the Falcon, the hunter that rewrote naval history. At 06:45 hours on June 6, 1944, Commander Arthur Hale stood inside the cramped conning tower of the USS Falcon, peering through his periscope at 3 Japanese destroyers slicing through the moonlit waters near Tawi-Tawi. He was 38 years old, on his 6th war patrol, with 19 enemy ships already destroyed under his command. For the past 3 weeks, the Falcon had haunted Japanese supply lines like a phantom, and now the Imperial Navy had had enough. They had dispatched Minazuru, Hayanami, and Tanokaze, each with orders to hunt and destroy the American submarine that had embarrassed them in front of their high command. Until that spring, no American submarine had ever faced a Japanese destroyer head-on and lived to tell the tale. A destroyer could run at 36 knots, while a submerged submarine could barely reach 9. Between December 1941 and early 1944, Japanese destroyers had sunk 15 U.S. submarines. Not a single American submarine had ever sunk a Japanese destroyer while both were in direct combat. That changed on April 14, 1944, when the destroyer Ikazuma charged the Falcon's position at full speed. Everyone in the conning tower expected Commander Hale to order a crash dive and flee. Instead, he did the unthinkable. He turned toward the enemy. At 900 yards, he fired 4 torpedoes in a fan spread. 2 struck midships. The destroyer blew apart and sank in less than 6 minutes. Hale's radio report was terse and legendary. Expended 4 torpedoes, destroyed 1 destroyer. The message rippled through the entire Pacific submarine fleet. To many, he was a hero. To the Imperial Japanese Navy, he was a ghost that needed exorcising. Admiral Suemu Toyoda, commander of the combined fleet, was enraged. Between January and May 1944, Japan had already lost 25 destroyers, vital escorts for their carriers and troop convoys. Every loss was another fracture in Operation Ago, Japan's plan to annihilate the coming American invasion fleet near the Philippines. By late May, Toyota concentrated his entire mobile fleet at Tawi-Tawi anchorage. 4 battleships, including Yamato, 8 carriers, 15 cruisers, and 27 destroyers. The largest gathering of Japanese naval power since Midway. American codebreakers quickly intercepted signals revealing their position. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of the U.S. submarine forces in the Pacific, immediately dispatched USS Falcon to patrol the surrounding waters and attack targets of opportunity. For 9 days, Hale's submarine prowled unseen, listening to distant propellers and scanning for radar pings across the horizon. The crew had fallen into that strange rhythm of submarine life. Silence, sweat, and the constant weight of steel pressing in from every side. Then, at Aero 300 on June 6th, a Japanese patrol plane caught sight of Falcon's periscope wake, 15 miles north of Tawi-Tawi. Within minutes, 3 destroyers were dispatched. The hunt had begun. Inside the submarine, Hale's men moved quickly, closing hatches, checking depth gauges, loading torpedo tubes. In the darkened conning tower, the only light came from the faint glow of the periscope eyepiece. Through it, the commander watched Minazuru charging straight toward them, zigzagging to avoid torpedoes. Behind her, 2 more destroyers fanned out wide, boxing the Falcon in. "Bring her bow around," Hale ordered quietly. "We'll meet her head-on." The helmsman's hands trembled as he spun the wheel. The range closed fast. 100 yards. 900. 700. Every man knew what was coming. A down-the-throat shot. Firing straight at an approaching destroyer was madness. If the torpedoes missed, they'd be crushed under depth charges. If they dived too soon, the destroyer would ram them before the tubes could flood. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. 3 flashes of compressed air burst from the bow. The Falcon angled down hard, 30 degrees, diving for the depths. 40 seconds later, 2 explosions rocked the hull so violently that light fixtures shattered and men were thrown from their stations. A third blast followed, deeper, heavier. and then silence. Hale rose to periscope depth. Where the Minazuru had been moments earlier, there was only wreckage and a spreading oil slick. He exhaled slowly. "One down," he said. The other two destroyers had already broken formation, their depth charges falling harmlessly into empty water. But the message was clear. The Japanese knew now that the Falcon was not prey. It was a predator. Far above, Admiral Toyota received the report at 0900 hours. His fury was volcanic. Within the hour, he ordered 6 more destroyers into the area, with constant air patrols every 20 minutes. But Hale wasn't finished hunting. The Falcon cruised silently beneath the dark waters, every man aboard whispering, moving as though the ocean itself were listening. After the destruction of Minazuru, Commander Arthur Hale knew the Japanese would not rest. Patrol planes scoured the skies every half hour, and destroyers prowled every shipping lane between Tawi-Tawi and Borneo. By the night of June 7th, the submarine had been submerged for nearly 18 hours. Batteries ran low, air grew heavy, and the metallic taste of recycled oxygen filled the men's throats. Hale surfaced at Aero 2:30 to recharge. The night was perfect. No moon, thick cloud cover, waves rolling gently over the South China Sea. The men climbed onto the bridge to gulp fresh air, their eyes scanning the horizon. Then, at 0314, the radar operator spoke. "Contact, bearing 095, range 8,000 yards, moving fast." The blip on the radar moved at about 29 knots, almost certainly a destroyer. Hale's instincts sharpened. "Battle stations," he ordered. "This will be close." The target was later identified as the Hayanami, a 1,000-ton destroyer that had been searching for submarines since midnight. Her captain, Commander Hideo Kuroda, had received orders to return to base at 3 o'clock. Exhausted, he never expected an American submarine to attack on the surface in the dead of night. Hale did exactly that. He ordered full speed ahead, 21 knots, bringing the Falcon into a head-on approach. The submarine's diesel engines roared beneath the waves, closing the distance fast. Hale wanted to get inside the destroyer's radar detection range before she could recognize the threat. At 4,000 yards, Hayanami's radar operator spotted a faint contact, small, fast-moving. Kuroda assumed it was another destroyer returning to base, but at 3,000 yards the mistake became clear. Submarine! American submarine! Kuroda screamed for flank speed and turned hard to ram, but Hale was faster. At 2,200 yards, he fired 4 torpedoes in rapid succession. The seconds that followed stretched into eternity, until the sea erupted in fire. 2 torpedoes struck Hayanami's starboard side near the aft magazine. The explosion tore off the stern completely. The destroyer rolled 90 degrees, propellers still spinning as the ship vanished beneath the black waves. When the shock waves subsided, the Falcon's crew stared in awe at the fading oil fire. Commander Kuroda and 150 of his men went down with their ship. It was Hale's second destroyer in 24 hours. He ordered the Falcon to dive immediately. Within minutes, Japanese patrol planes were sweeping overhead, dropping flares and depth charges into the empty sea. The crew endured 2 hours of nerve-shattering explosions, the submarine rocking violently as pressure waves slammed against its hull. But the Falcon survived, silent, invisible, deadly. By dawn, Admiral Toyota had received the news. Another destroyer lost, this time at night. His temper boiled over. He ordered 8 destroyers pulled from convoy escort duty to form special hunter-killer groups whose only mission was to find and destroy the American Phantom submarine. Maximum aggression. No retreat, his order read. Hale, however, had already moved south toward Sabutu Passage, a narrow strait between Tawi-Tawi and Borneo. It was one of the most heavily patrolled routes in the region, exactly the kind of place he liked. He studied his chart and smiled faintly. "Let's see how many more they'll send," he murmured. By the afternoon of June 8, 1944, the USS Falcon had reached the southern edge of Sabutu Passage, a narrow channel barely 10 miles wide between Tawi-Tawi and the northern coast of Borneo. It was a death zone for submarines. Shallow waters, constant patrols, and destroyers sweeping day and night with sonar. Commander Arthur Hale knew it was madness to be there. That was exactly why he came. At 1400 hours, the lookout spotted 2 Japanese destroyers moving in formation. Hale identified one as Tanakaze, displacing about 1,300 tons, and the other an unknown escort vessel. Both were zigzagging at 26 knots, conducting a standard search sweep. The Falcon descended to periscope depth. Hale studied their movements for an hour and a half, memorizing every pattern. The destroyers changed course roughly every 8 minutes, a perfect rhythm. That gave him perhaps 30 seconds to set up a firing solution each time they turned. "Helm, bring her 5 degrees starboard. Range 2,000, he ordered. He waited for the destroyers to complete another turn. When Tanakaze came about, presenting her broadside, the range closed to 1,200 yards. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, fire 4. The torpedoes hissed away into the dark sea, leaving thin trails of bubbles. The first torpedo missed, passing just ahead of the destroyer's bow. The second struck near the bridge, and the third hit the forward magazine. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. A flash of orange and white ripped through the sea, and the sound thundered even through the Falcon's steel hull. Men covered their ears as the submarine trembled under the shockwave. When the smoke cleared through the periscope, Tanakaze was gone. Only broken debris and burning fuel drifted across the surface. The explosion had ripped the ship in two. Both halves sank within 3 minutes. The escort destroyer turned immediately, charging at full speed, sonar pinging furiously. "Dive! Take her down to 400 feet!" Hale barked. The Falcon descended, groaning under the pressure. The first depth charge exploded above them, then another, and another. For 40 minutes, the sea convulsed around them in thunderous bursts. Each explosion dimmed the lights. Each creak of the hull reminded the men how thin the line between life and death really was. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The Japanese ship had given up. Hale rose slowly to periscope depth. The water above shimmered with sunlight and drifting debris. His crew exhaled in disbelief. 3 destroyers in 3 days. He noted the time in his logbook. June 8th, 1632 hours. Far away at fleet headquarters, Admiral Toyota was pacing the deck of his flagship Musashi. Reports of another lost destroyer had reached him, and his fury turned to fear. He realized that the American submarine was not just sinking ships. It was unraveling the foundation of Japan's defensive network. Without destroyers, his carriers and convoys were vulnerable. He summoned his senior staff. "Find that submarine," he said coldly, "no matter the cost." But by the time the order spread through the fleet, Hale was already planning his next strike, one that would push his luck and his crew to the very limits of survival. Dawn broke over the South China Sea on June 9th, 1944, with a pale orange haze spreading across the horizon. Commander Arthur Hale and the crew of the USS Falcon had slept little. Their submarine was battered, the air thick with diesel fumes and sweat. Yet the men moved with quiet efficiency. They knew their captain wasn't finished. At 0500 hours, Hale ordered the Falcon to periscope depth, about 12 miles southwest of Tawi Tawi. The sea was calm. Through the lens, he saw something that made his breath catch. 4 Japanese destroyers, steaming abreast in formation, conducting a coordinated anti-submarine sweep. Their sonar pings were so loud that the sound operator could hear them even without headphones. Hale counted them one by one, 4 hunters moving like wolves. The Falcon had only 8 torpedoes left. 4 destroyers, murmured Lieutenant Cole, his executive officer. "Sir, we can't take them all." Hale didn't answer immediately. He studied the formation, the lead ship zigzagging violently, the second holding a steady course. He finally spoke, his voice calm but iron-hard. "We'll take the steady one." At 0610, he lined up the shot. Range, 3,900 yards and closing fast. He waited until the destroyer turned directly toward them, its bow slicing through the waves, before giving the order. "Fire 1. Fire 2, fire 3. 3 torpedoes streaked toward the target. 20 seconds later, 3 thunderclaps ripped the ocean apart. The destroyer vanished in a blinding eruption that hurled fragments hundreds of feet into the air. The shockwave struck the Falcon's hull like a hammer blow. When Hale lifted the periscope again, nothing remained but debris and smoke. The other 3 destroyers converged immediately, their sonar beams sweeping the depths. "Take her deep. 500 feet," Hale barked. The submarine plunged, the hull groaning as water pressure mounted. Moments later, the first depth charge detonated. Then another. Then 20 more. The lights flickered out. Emergency lamps glowed red as the crew fought to keep the Falcon level. A pipe burst in the forward torpedo room, spraying seawater across the deck. Men scrambled with wrenches and rags, plugging leaks in near-total darkness, while explosions pounded the sea above them. 2 hours passed like a lifetime. Finally, the noise faded. The sonar went silent. The destroyers had withdrawn. Hale climbed to periscope depth, scanning for movement. Nothing but drifting oil and foam. 4 destroyers in 4 days. The captain didn't smile. He didn't even speak. He simply scribbled in his logbook, 4th confirmed. Fuel reserves low. He knew what it meant. The Falcon had burned through more than 60% of her diesel. They had 3, maybe 4 days before they would have to retreat toward Fremantle. But Hale also knew the enemy was in chaos. At Tawi-Tawi, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commander of Japan's mobile fleet, was reeling from the reports. 4 destroyers lost, 1 submarine responsible. He calculated grimly. If 1 American boat could penetrate his screen this easily, then every carrier and battleship in the anchorage was at risk. At 1400 hours, Ozawa sent an urgent message to Admiral Toyota. Anchorage compromised. Recommend immediate fleet movement. The warning changed everything. Within 24 hours, Japan's largest naval force began preparations to abandon Tawi-Tawi, leaving behind precious supplies, maintenance crews, and reconnaissance operations, all because of 1 submarine. That night, as the Falcon glided silently through black water, Hale stood at the periscope again. His face was pale in the red light, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. He didn't know it yet, but the destruction he'd unleashed over 4 days would ripple far beyond these waters, shaping the course of one of the greatest naval battles in history. On the morning of June 10, 1944, the Japanese mobile fleet began to stir at Tawi-Tawi anchorage. The low hum of engines rippled across the bay as mechanics rushed to prepare the massive ships for departure. 4 battleships, 8 carriers, 15 cruisers, and 24 destroyers, nearly the entire striking force of the Imperial Navy, were preparing to leave. The reason? 1 submarine. The destruction caused by Commander Arthur Hale and the USS Falcon had broken Admiral Ozawa's confidence in his own defenses. 4 destroyers lost in 4 days to a single submarine was intolerable. Hale had turned the hunter's game upside down. By 800 hours, the mobile fleet began steaming northeast toward the Philippine Sea, 6 days earlier than planned. Their supply lines weren't ready, reconnaissance planes hadn't mapped the enemy's positions, and destroyer screens were still disorganized from the anti-submarine patrols. But Admiral Toyota agreed with Ozawa's assessment. Remaining at Tawi-Tawi with an unseen killer lurking below was suicide. From the Falcon's conning tower, Hale watched the horizon through his periscope. Distant plumes of smoke rose from departing warships. The enemy was running, because of him. Yet there was no satisfaction in his eyes, only calculation. He knew this movement meant a chance to intercept isolated targets before they regrouped. By late afternoon, the Falcon had crept north toward Sibutu Passage, where 2 more destroyers patrolled the narrow strait. They were moving fast, sweeping their sonar arcs across the water. Hale studied their movements with mathematical precision. 5 torpedoes left, reported Lieutenant Cole. That's enough for 1 more fight, Hale replied quietly. At 17:15, the periscope's crosshairs settled on the lead destroyer. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. The first torpedo struck the bow, tearing open steel and wood in a geyser of flame. The destroyer slowed but didn't sink. The second destroyer instantly turned to charge, its propellers roaring through the water. Hale fired his final 2 torpedoes. Both missed. Emergency dive, he ordered. The Falcon plunged, its planes angled steeply downward. The destroyer passed overhead at full speed, dropping 6 depth charges in a tight pattern. The submarine shook violently. Bolts rattled loose and gauges cracked under the pressure. Depth 400 feet, 450, 500, called the helmsman. The explosions continued for 90 minutes, 42 depth charges in total. 3 detonated close enough to rupture pipes and shatter glass dials. The control room hissed with leaking air and seawater, but somehow, the Falcon held together. At 1900 the sea went quiet. The Japanese destroyer had exhausted its ordnance and withdrew. Hale waited another hour before surfacing. When the submarine broke through the waves, the world above was silent. The ocean stretched endlessly. No destroyers, no planes, only the low thrum of diesel engines. The men climbed to the bridge, faces hollow, but alive. They had survived again. For now. Hale set course south at 8 knots, conserving fuel for the long voyage back to Fremantle. The patrol had lasted 17 days. 5 confirmed attacks, 4 destroyers sunk, 1 crippled. The most successful anti-destroyer campaign in the history of submarine warfare. When the Falcon returned to port on June 26th, Admiral Charles Lockwood was waiting on the pier. He had followed every radio report, every coded transmission from Hale's patrol. 5 destroyers attacked, 4 destroyed, 1 damaged. 12 days of combat that reshaped the Pacific War. Lockwood clasped Hale's hand and pinned the Navy Cross to his chest. Then he asked the question every commander dreaded. "Can you do it again?" Hale's answer came without hesitation. "Give me torpedoes, and I'll sink 10. The USS Falcon spent the month of July 1944 docked at Fremantle, its hull scarred and weary from battle. Welders patched buckled plates, engineers replaced cracked valves, and electricians rewired every flickering circuit. But Commander Arthur Hale was not resting. He spent his days in the briefing room, sketching attack angles on a chalkboard, revising, firing patterns, and drilling his new crew in the daring tactic that had made him a legend, the down-the-throat strike. To Hale, the method was simple. Attack head-on. No retreat, no hesitation. Fire torpedoes straight into an approaching destroyer's bow at point-blank range, then dive beneath her keel. Every second mattered. Every decision was life or death. By mid-July, word of the Falcon's patrol had spread across the Pacific submarine fleet. Hale's combat reports were copied and studied in every wardroom. Admirals discussed them in hushed tones. For the first time, the idea of aggressive submarine warfare became doctrine rather than exception. Between June and August 1944, American submarines began experimenting with Hale's methods. Within 8 weeks, they sank 14 Japanese destroyers, more than in the previous 2 years combined. Hale's boldness had rewritten the rules of underwater combat. On August 5th, the Falcon departed Fremantle for its 7th patrol. This time, Hale commanded a wolf pack, 3 submarines working together: the USS Falcon, USS Heron, and USS Hammer. He led the group himself, their mission to hunt Japanese convoys west of Luzon. Their first strike came on August 21st near Palawan Bay. The Wolfpack intercepted a 16-ship convoy, tankers, cargo vessels, and escorts, bound for the Philippines. In a coordinated attack that lasted 40 minutes, they sank 4 freighters totaling over 23,000 tons. The next night, Falcon and Heron spotted 3 coastal defense ships near Baton Point. They attacked simultaneously, sinking all 3. Hale's submarine was credited with 2 kills, the frigates Matsura and Hibari. But on August 23rd, the situation shifted. USS Heron had expended all torpedoes and was forced to withdraw. That left only Falcon and Hammer operating off Dassault Bay, along the western coast of Luzon. Japanese intelligence had been tracking them. They had decoded fragments of the Wolfpack's radio transmissions during the Palawan attack. Admiral Toyota, still enraged by Hale's earlier patrol, decided to end the Americans' luck once and for all. He dispatched 2 specialized escort ships, CD-24 and Patrol Boat 103, veteran submarine hunters equipped with advanced sonar. For 3 days they prowled the shallows, dropping sonar buoys and depth charges in sweeping patterns. On August 24th, they found their prey. At 0455, the USS Hammer, 4 miles north of Hermana Island, sighted the Falcon through her periscope. Both submarines were preparing to attack a damaged Japanese destroyer drifting nearby, one crippled in the previous day's assault. Then Hammer's sonar operator froze. Echo ranging close, bearing southeast. 2 sharp pings followed, growing louder with each passing second. 2 Japanese escorts were closing fast, and Falcon was right in their path. At 0453 hours on August 24, 1944, the USS Hammer glided silently 4 miles off Hermana Island, periscope raised. Through the glass, Commander Joseph Ward could see the USS Falcon, surfaced about 4,500 yards to the south. Both submarines were preparing for a joint attack on a crippled Japanese destroyer drifting from the previous day's battle. Then, Ward's sonar operator stiffened. Echo ranging close, bearing 070. It's getting louder, sir. The rhythmic pings grew sharper, echoing through the steel hull. Ward's face hardened. 2 contacts, the sonar man whispered. They were Japanese escort ships, CD-24 and Patrol Boat 103. Sweeping the area at 18 knots, their sonar beams combing every pocket of the deep. They had been hunting American submarines for 3 days, following intercepted radio transmissions from the Wolfpack's earlier attacks. Inside the Falcon, Commander Arthur Hale was scanning the sea when the first ping reverberated through the hull. It was faint at first, then stronger, like a heartbeat coming closer. "Flank speed! Crash dive!" he ordered. Diesel engines roared to life as the submarine tilted steeply downward, diving at a 35-degree angle. Compressed air hissed through ballast vents. The Falcon's nose plunged, leaving a frothing trail of bubbles that marked her position on the surface. On board CD-24, the sonar operator shouted, "Target acquired! Range 100 yards! Depth 200 feet and descending." The Japanese captain barked for an immediate depth charge run. At 0547, 6 depth charges detonated in a perfect spread. The explosions bracketed the Falcon's position, 3 going off within 50 feet of her hull. The submarine lurched violently. Light bulbs burst, and the aft torpedo room filled with blinding spray as seawater poured through a cracked seam, flooding aft. "Pressure rising fast!" shouted the chief engineer. The Falcon's stern began to sink under the weight of water. Hale fought to stabilize her, shouting over the roar of rushing air. "Blow ballast! Emergency surface!" Compressed air screamed through pipes, but the flood was too heavy. The gauges spun wildly. At 0552, CD-24 made a second attack run, dropping another full pattern set to detonate deeper, around 250 feet. The ocean exploded. The blasts struck the hull amidships, rupturing the main pressure compartment. The control room filled with freezing seawater as electrical systems shorted out. Emergency lighting flickered once, then went dark. The Falcon began to spiral downward, her stern sinking faster than her bow. At 600 feet, well below her safe limit, the steel hull groaned like a dying creature. Rivets popped one by one. Then came the sound every submariner feared most, an ear-splitting metallic scream followed by a deafening crack. The USS Falcon imploded. In less than 3 minutes, she was gone. At 600, both Japanese escorts surfaced amid an expanding oil slick. Chunks of cork, shattered wood, and fuel bubbled to the surface. They circled for 2 hours, dropping additional depth charges to be certain. No survivors appeared. 79 men had gone down with the Falcon. Commander Arthur Hale, radioman Calvin Boyd, and every officer and sailor who had turned one submarine into the most feared destroyer killer in the Pacific. That night, USS Hammer stayed submerged until darkness, listening to the fading sounds of enemy propellers. When Ward finally surfaced, he transmitted a single coded message. "Falcon lost. No survivors." The signal reached Admiral Lockwood in Fremantle the next morning. He read it in silence, then ordered all submarines in the Dassel Bay area to withdraw immediately. The war would continue, but one of its greatest warriors had vanished beneath the sea. The news of the Falcon's disappearance reached Fremantle on the morning of August 25, 1944. In the command center, Admiral Charles Lockwood read the decoded transmission from USS Hammer in silence. "Falcon lost. No survivors. He set the paper down without a word. Around him, officers stood motionless, waiting for orders that did not come. After a long moment, Lockwood exhaled and said quietly, "Pull every submarine out of Dassault Bay. No further operations there." For the rest of the day, the base moved like a ship in mourning. The crew of the Falcon had been more than just another patrol unit. They had become a legend. And now they were gone. In Tokyo, Admiral Toyota received the same news from the opposite side of the war. Reports from CD-24 and Patrol Boat 103 confirmed the kill. Large quantities of oil and wreckage, no survivors. The submarine that had terrorized his destroyers for months was finally destroyed. He ordered commendations for both ships and a ceremonial sake toast for their crews. But what Toyota could not see, what no one yet understood, was the cost of that victory. 9 days after the Falcon's last battle, the Battle of the Philippine Sea erupted. On June 19, 1944, 15 American carriers under Admiral Raymond Spruance clashed with 9 Japanese carriers commanded by Jisaburo Ozawa. Nearly 900 American aircraft faced just over 400 Japanese. The result was a slaughter. American pilots shot down 376 enemy planes while losing barely 30 of their own. The skies burned with falling metal. 3 Japanese carriers, Taiho, Shokaku, and Hio, were sunk. 2 battleships and a cruiser were badly damaged. The Imperial Navy lost almost 3/4 of its carrier air groups in a single battle. Historians would later call it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, but Admiral Spruance's decisive victory might have played out very differently had the Japanese fleet not been forced to leave Tawi-Tawi 6 days early. Had Ozawa remained on schedule, his fleet would have been fully supplied and his destroyers properly organized. His reconnaissance planes would have had 4 full days to locate the American fleet before the clash. Instead, the early withdrawal left his carriers scattered, underfueled, and blind. The chaos had begun with Arthur Hale's patrol. His 4 days of destruction at Tawi-Tawi had convinced the Japanese that remaining there meant death. And so, when they fled, they unknowingly handed the Americans one of the greatest strategic advantages of the Pacific War. Admiral Lockwood would later write in his memoir, "Falcon's 5th Patrol was the most strategically important submarine operation of the Pacific. She didn't just sink ships, she changed the war." Between December 1941 and August 1944, American submarines sank more than 300 Japanese ships, totaling over 5 million tons of enemy shipping. But among those, only 30 warships. Most submarine captains avoided destroyers. They were too fast, too well armed, too dangerous. Commander Hale had defied that logic. He proved that courage and precision could overturn the math of naval warfare. When the enemy expected you to flee, charging forward could be deadlier than hiding. For his audacity, for his brilliance, and for his ultimate sacrifice, Arthur Hale was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His widow received it on the White House lawn in March 1946. The inscription reading, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity. 5 enemy destroyers sunk in 5 short-range attacks. A fearless commander whose valor changed the course of war." By the time the guns fell silent in 1945, the ocean had swallowed thousands of ships and tens of thousands of men. Among them lay the USS Falcon, resting 3,700 feet below the South China Sea, silent, unseen but not forgotten. In the years that followed, Admiral Charles Lockwood often referred to Commander Arthur Hale's patrols when teaching new officers. "He changed the way we fight," Lockwood told them. "He proved that courage and aggression can rewrite doctrine." Before Hale's final mission, submarine tactics emphasized stealth and evasion. If detected, a captain was to dive deep, run silent, and pray the enemy lost the trail. Engaging a destroyer in direct combat was considered suicide, but Hale shattered that belief. He understood that Japanese destroyer captains expected submarines to flee. When the Falcon charged instead, the enemy hesitated for seconds, precious seconds that turned the hunter into the hunted. Those lessons spread quickly. Between June and December 1944, 12 American submarines adopted variations of Hale's aggressive tactics. USS Tern sank 2 destroyers. USS Triggerfish sank 1. USS Barbel destroyed another and damaged a second. USS Flasher eliminated 3 escort vessels with direct down-the-throat attacks. Across the fleet, the tactic's success rate reached nearly 63%. But innovation carried a price. The Japanese soon adapted, turning away when submarines charged or slowing to let torpedoes pass ahead before counterattacking. Losses rose. Between August and December 1944, 9 American submarines were lost to destroyers. Yet even as casualties mounted, the U.S. Navy refused to revert to defensive tactics. Admiral Lockwood made the decision himself. "We will accept higher losses if it means destroying their convoys completely." And the results were devastating. Between January and August 1945, American submarines sank over 430 merchant ships and more than 50 warships, strangling Japan's supply lines. By the time peace came, the Empire's shipping capacity had fallen to less than a quarter of what it had been at the war's start. Commander Arthur Hale never saw that victory. He died 3 months after his greatest triumph, lost with his crew in the depths off Dassel Bay. Yet his tactics endured. Every submarine commander in the Pacific studied his reports. Every new attack plan referenced his equations for head-on assaults. The down-the-throat doctrine became a case study in naval warfare, a lesson in courage through controlled risk. 80 years later, an expedition led by explorer Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 project found the wreck of the Falcon, upright and mostly intact on the seabed west of Luzon. Depth-charge scars still marked her conning tower, but her hull remained sealed, an iron tomb for 79 men. The site was declared a protected war grave. No salvage permitted, no intrusion allowed. For the families who had waited decades, the discovery brought closure. Flowers were laid at sea. Memorials lit up across naval bases around the world. At the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, instructors still teach the Falcon's patrols as a model of adaptive warfare. Though modern submarines now launch wire-guided torpedoes from miles away, the principle remains unchanged. When your enemy expects you to hide, attack. At Arlington National Cemetery, a simple headstone bears the name Arthur Hale, his rank, his service years, and one line beneath, Medal of Honor, Destroyer Killer. Each August 24th, the families of the Falcon's crew gather there. They bring flowers and faded photographs, telling stories of fathers and brothers who never came home. Farm boys from Iowa, machinists from Michigan, college graduates from California. They were young, most barely 25, yet they had faced the ocean and the enemy without fear. They served knowing the odds, and they went anyway. The years turned, and the war that had once set the oceans ablaze faded into memory. Yet beneath the quiet surface of the South China Sea, the USS Falcon still lay in darkness, undisturbed, a steel monument to courage. In 2024, 8 decades after her final dive, an underwater exploration team led by Tim Taylor finally found her. Their remotely operated camera descended through the blue haze until a familiar outline emerged. Falcon resting upright on the seabed, 3,750 feet down, 12 miles west of Dassel Bay. The hull was remarkably intact, except for a ragged tear near the conning tower where depth charges had struck. When the images were transmitted to the surface, the control room aboard the research vessel fell silent. Men and women who had never known war sat speechless, staring at the face of history. For the families who had waited 80 years, the discovery brought something that no telegram ever could: peace. The U.S. Navy officially designated the site a protected war grave. No salvage operations, no intrusions. Only the sea and the silence would guard those 79 souls who had vanished in 1944. In Annapolis, instructors at the Naval Academy added a new case study to their warfare curriculum: the Falcon Doctrine. They didn't teach it as nostalgia, but as a philosophy. Submarine technology had changed beyond recognition. Torpedoes guided by wire and satellite, sonar maps rendered in 3 dimensions. But the essence of Arthur Hale's strategy still resonated. When your enemy expects retreat, advance. When he believes he knows your limits, exceed them. That principle had shaped not just tactics, but mindset. Aggression through precision, audacity through control. It was the creed of those who understood that victory often comes to those willing to risk everything. Researchers at the Naval History and Heritage Command continue to study Hale's original patrol reports, every radio message, every torpedo firing solution, every moment logged under fire. They reveal a commander who adapted constantly, who turned every near-death experience into another calculation, another refinement. His legacy is not in how many ships he sank, but in how he thought. At Arlington National Cemetery, Section 59, Grave 874, the headstone of Commander Arthur Hale stands among thousands. Beneath the carved words Medal of Honor, Destroyer Killer, the earth is quiet. Every year on August 24th, relatives, historians, and sailors come. They lay wreaths, polish the marble, and whisper stories passed through generations. Some visitors come from halfway across the world. One elderly woman, clutching a faded photograph, once said softly, "He was my father's best friend. They said he laughed even under fire. The sea took them, but it never silenced them." From Iowa's cornfields to the shipyards of Michigan, from small towns in Oregon to cities across the East Coast, the names of the Falcon's crew live on bronze plaques and in family stories. They remind each new generation that history isn't made by those who play it safe. It is made by those who charge toward the impossible and refuse to turn away. And so the Falcon remains, far below, surrounded by coral and quiet, her flag etched by time, her hull kissed by the currents. She sleeps there still, a silent guardian in the deep, carrying the echoes of 79 men who changed naval warfare forever. The story of the USS Falcon and Commander Arthur Hale is more than history. It's a reminder of courage, sacrifice, and the price of freedom beneath the waves. Their legacy endures wherever bravery meets the impossible. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to help keep these forgotten heroes alive. Every click helps us bring more true stories of valor and brotherhood back from the depths of time. Honor the brave. Remember the lost. Keep history alive.